Hi everyone and welcome back. I'm going to continue with Scottish lore and folklore. It was actually a book that I found at a little free library that caught my interest, and I'm just going to read little sections, snippets of Scottish folklore, superstition, things like that, anything in this book um, that I find interesting that I'd like to share. So if you haven't already, I've done a video on their section of birth, which technically should be like newborn child superstitions. Um, so that was one video that's already been done. I'm going to read the section on death, which is much shorter. And let me share to you what it says. It says, from birth to death seems a natural enough sequence of events, at least to the Scot, for to us, death has never held the fears that it holds for some of the world's peoples. For centuries, to us, as a more or less composite people, and for centuries before that, to the two main constituent races from which we are descended, death has never meant the end. So I think that's interesting. So they're saying the Scots, and maybe I need to brush up on my history. Maybe this will become a history channel because I've been having a lot of questions as I'm reading these. So they're saying the Scots come from two different races of people, which I guess makes sense because the Scots weren't always the Scots, right? They had to originate from somewhere, kind of like how the Scots and like Irish and others are meshed together to be like the Celts, right? But the Celts are also a specific set of people. So maybe it's all about like the vernacular and how you linguistically, I guess is what I mean to say, linguistically, you know, the etymology of the words. There's a lot of ologies, a lot of studies, a lot of specific areas that need to be explored. Wow, I'm only a sentence in and we're already on a tangent. Let's keep going. Far more than most Occidental peoples, we have always thought of death as another beginning, as a rebirth, and as a rebirth to something better. So that's interesting. That seems like a very Christian point of view, is like death is moving on to something better. Um, and this faith we held long before the Christian doctrine of the immortality of the soul was brought to us to lighten our pagan hearts. Although there is nothing to prove that our pagan hearts were not light, and our souls free at a time when some of our near neighbors, were wandering in an extremely sordid spiritual darkness, somewhere on the dreary salt marsh wastes of the Baltic. Indeed, there is much to prove that our distant ancestors held very decided views on spiritual rebirth and the notion of another and brighter world beyond. Um, so they're basically saying, like, hey, the Christians didn't originate the idea that rebirth to something better after death in this life. And that, from what I've interpreted from this, that Christians felt the need to impose that this belief was unique to them onto the Scots because they were pagan, trying to shift them to a monotheistic culture. And then saying that that idea, that doctrine, is unique to them as Christians, which is interesting. Let's keep going. Far down the centuries, there has come to us from the Scandinavian fringe the story of Valhalla, the heaven of the warriors. And from our Celtic forebears, there has come the beautiful legend of Tir na Og, the land of eternal youth, and other legends too, of invisible other worlds. And with each other world, there goes a name of sheer poetic beauty. Magmala, the plain of honey, and 2, silver cloud plain, and the country of promise. Sound like very flowery places. In these pagan heavens, sorry, pagan heavens, there were to be found all the noblest and all the fairest, brave men and lovely women, and palaces ringing with music and laughter, and wines that were, and wonderful foods. But the old pagan Gaelic heavens were not places of effeminate luxuriousness, nor places of sensual orgies. The great pastime was in heaven, as on earth, warfare and bloodshedding, for the Gael was never at any time a pacifist, and a heaven without a fight in it would have been no heaven at all. So I think they're specifically talking about Valhalla or different iterations of Valhalla because the idea was that you could only, if I remember, and maybe we'll have to do another story time with Scandinavian or Norse, you know, mythologies and superstitions. But it's my understanding that Valhalla is only meant for warriors who died in battle or women who died in childbirth. So you had to basically die a pretty gruesomely awful death to even get into Valhalla. And then once you're in Valhalla, you're basically waiting for Ragnarok to happen so that you could go fight in Ragnarok. So I get what they're saying in that it's a very bloodlusty kind of afterlife, which I don't think I interpreted that they shared. I don't think the Scots shared that view. And maybe that's what they were trying to say was that the Christians were imposing this version of the afterlife on them with the intentions of maybe shifting them from this particular mindset. But they didn't even have that mindset. So maybe that's a different discussion to have. Through the ages, that conception of a heaven naturally changed, and with the coming of Christianity, it faded out to linger only as a tale that is told. Strangely enough, it needed the coming of Christianity to give us even the few terrors of death we possess. So, and they did say that earlier, they weren't afraid of death. Like, death was a natural occurrence. It happens, it's a circle of life, it's going to come. So they didn't really fear it. They just viewed it as the inevitable. And what I feel like what they're saying is what is what will be. You know, like they don't have any fear of what they're going to walk into in their version of the afterlife. It gives me the sense it's supposed to be peaceful. So they're just going to, you know, accept it and move on. Whatever that looks like to them. So they're saying that they do now have fears when it comes to death because of Christianity coming in. And most of our beliefs to do with death are of comparatively recent origin. So it doesn't sound like they had a lot of superstition or belief in death itself, right? Interesting. Death is near at hand when a clock persists in crowing between midnight and 3 o'clock in the morning. The foundation of that superstition is easily accounted for, and it is common to most Christian peoples. I've never heard of that. The howling of a dog in the night is always supposed to herald the approach of death, and if the dog is watched at, it will point the direction of where the death will take place. Dogs see wraiths where human eyes see nothing, and horses too will shy and bolt and whinny and neigh in ways inexplicable to the material minded. Now, I have 4 dogs, and one is a shepherd hound mix. But they do that when there's predators outside. So I wonder how much of this superstition is related to predator related deaths or them like sensing something sketchy or someone something at odd out there. I wonder if that has any connection to this superstition because dogs are protectors. Like we have bred them from wild animals to be companion protectors. So it would make sense that they would alert to things that could possibly cause death with ill intention, right? So I I feel like A and B are connected, but you're forgetting about C kind of situation. So we can discuss that another time if you want as well. A bird tapping at a window is a sign of death. So too is a gull sitting on one leg on top of a house. I thought they only sat on one leg. Is that the fact they're on top of a house? But they would only be that far from the sea if there was no food. So is that saying that there's going to be famine or not a good catch? Is that why the gull is on the house? Doesn't really explicitly say. Death will come soon to the man or woman who sees a raven flying straight before him or her on the road he or she is taking. Now, I have heard the whole raven thing. It's very Scandinavian. Very Scandinavian. I don't know how to explain that one, except for ravens are very smart and they're probably trying to be funny to them. I'm not sure. I'm not sure how to interpret that. The laughter of an owl is a sure portent of death to someone in the neighborhood. Strange and unaccountable rapings in a house are a sign of death's coming to someone living under the roof. A lot of bird related superstitions. They live in forests, right? The Scots were in a very foresty area. So I guess it would make sense that there were a lot of birds and bird related superstitions. When anyone dies suddenly, he or she is supposed to have fallen a victim to the evil eye. I didn't realize that was a Scottish thing. To touch the corpse of a friend or an acquaintance is an indication that one has done nothing in any way to contribute to the death. And touching to gives immunity from dreams about the dead. So it sounds like they encouraged you touching the corpse, which is interesting because it is not explicitly ever told to me. But I get the sense that being raised as a Christian, it's touching a corpse is almost like desecration. Like you're desecrating something by giving physical contact to it because now the soul is gone, it's a husk, right? So you're not supposed to touch it. But I guess what they're trying to say is like if you're able to touch it, then superstitiously you had no role to play in the death or the results of death. So you're like protected, or it's interesting. Also that you don't dream about the dead. Like you're not going to be haunted. Maybe your conscience is clear. Maybe that's part of it too. When you believe that by touching a corpse, that signals to you that by not being harmed or like you touched the corpse, so that shows that you did not cause the death of that person. And then knowing that fact in your mind clears your conscience that there was nothing that you could have done. You didn't cause this. You couldn't have prevented it. Allows your brain almost the peace of mind of like not having to process that that grief or that guilt. And so you just don't have a dream about it because you don't have to process any guilt because you know you're guiltless. Right? Is that where we're getting at? That sounds like it makes sense. There may be places where the old dead rites are still observed. After the laying out of the corpse, a wooden platter is placed on the breast of the dead, and on the platter, separate and unmixed, is piled a little earth and a little salt. Salt. Interesting. The earth symbolical of the corruptible body, and the salt symbolical of the immortal spirit. So you got the soul, and then like I said, the husk, like the body, like it's the container the soul takes while it journeys through, kind of thing. No fire must be lit in the room where the body lies, and if a dog or cat passes over the body, it must at once be killed, which I found interesting, and I'm not really sure why. That probably needs some more research. Like, why do you need to kill the animal? I don't understand that part. I'm sure it has something to do with like the devil being changed or shape shifted into the animal, in like the devil or a demon like trying to claim the spirit of the body. Because I think there's something I read that it takes the soul quite a bit of time to fully release from the body. So I wonder if it has something to do with like the belief that animals are like from hell or the devil and is trying to claim the soul. I wonder how related that might be. Um, Friends and neighbors, to prevent any supernatural interference with the body, take it in turns to sit up with the corpse. They are provided with a Bible, a candle, food, and a bottle of whiskey. Oh, I wonder how many people volunteered just to get that bottle of whiskey. Hmm. I'm just chilling with my dead friend kind of thing. That was really morbid. Ooh, I guess you'd really have to have a lot of drinks and to be able to handle that type of more morbid, dark humor, I suppose. Um, the clock is stopped, and if there is a mirror in the room, it must be taken down or covered. Those who sit up will wait for the coming of the dawn to be relieved of their duty, for there must be no coming or going in the dark for fear of what might be seen. This sitting up is known as the wake or the lie wake. I wonder how wakes have changed then, because a wake that I'm aware of is kind of like a viewing of the body. It's your final opportunity to give your condolences and say goodbye to the corpse itself, right? To the body of the past loved one. And so like the wake is a very intimate with multiple people. It's not a single person. So I wonder how that has changed. There are tales of wakes being carried through with singing and dancing. Oh, that sounds more like what I'm used to. It's a celebration of life. I am used to a celebration of life. Um, I have not had anyone in my biological family pass quite yet. I did, but I didn't know the man, so I don't want to count that. But I have in my in-laws family, and they are very Irish. Um, with their beliefs and but their traditions and practices are very Irish, and they do celebrations of lives and singing and dancing and lots of loud music and remembering and laughing and crying and food, and it's a party. It's a party of your loved ones celebrating your life, and that is what they wanted, and that's what they got. It's beautiful. There are tales of wakes being carried through singing and dancing, such a procedure being obviously a long lingering remnant of some ancient pagan rite of speeding the dead to the happier land beyond and of rejoicing with him at his good fortune. So I think it's kind of like their interpretation of like the soul seeing this and the soul like deeming a fulfilled life of loved ones and seeing their loved ones, celebrating them, rejoicing them. Um, anything that they might have feared might be qualmed at that point. But I think those are interesting superstitions, interesting customs, interesting ways of processing and thinking about the afterlife and seeing how it kind of carries on to today. And it was interesting that they even said things like the wakes or our version of celebrations of life being a pagan tradition. I had never heard of that. Interesting. Well, those are some of my thoughts and my reading of the portion relating to superstitions and beliefs of lore and folklore related to death for Scottish traditions. And let me know if there's another section you want me to read or you want to they have like fairies, mermaids. There's a section on like the devil. Let me know what you're interested in. I'm sure it's in here somewhere. And I can always do another read aloud. Otherwise, have a great day and thank you for watching.